All right, Colin, thank you so much. Let us now go back to one of our top stories this afternoon, where sentencing in the case of two Northwest men who were found guilty yesterday of murdering 16-year-old Matlhomola Mosweu has been postponed to late January next year. Sentencing proceedings in the Northwest High Court sitting in Mahikeng, including arguments in mitigation and aggravation of sentence, will take place from January the 28th to the 31st of January 2019. Phillip, Schutte and Pieter Doorewaard were convicted yesterday of the murder of the teenager at Coligny in April last year. The two argued that the teenager had jumped off their bakkie on their way to the police station after they'd allegedly caught him stealing sunflower on a farm. Judge Ronald Hendricks ruled in his judgment that they had pushed Mosweu off the bakkie and could have foreseen that this would cause fatal injuries. We look at this and what it means for race relations here in South Africa. We are now joined in our studios in Johannesburg by Gabriel Crouse. He's an analyst from the Institute of Race Relations. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much indeed. Now, your take on yesterday's judgment?
Yeah, I think that first off, the loss of young Mosweu's life is a terrible blow. Condolences go to his family. The judgment, we've been waiting on this judgment for a long time. It was a long and drawn out affair. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to read the judgment in its entirety. Of course, it's open to appeal until the sentencing procedure is completed, and so we're going to have to see about whether they do make an appeal.
Or whether they wait for the sentencing in January.
Yeah.
And, you know, Gabriel, this case triggered so much anger and chaos in that small town of Coligny in the Northwest. And it also created so much racial divisions in the town, with many blaming racism for the killing. And this, of course, sparking the debate on racism in the country, more so in your smaller towns.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that terrible things happen in every society.
Yeah.
What defines us as a society is partly how we respond to those events. I think the response to Mosweu's death was irresponsible. I think there was terrible violence there. There was violent divisions and a lot of whitewashing over details. That's extremely regrettable. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to look hard at ourselves, look hard at one another, and try to find a way forward. Rather than sort of digging trenches and hurling grenades across the no man's land.
Yeah. What's your take on racism in small towns? I had a discussion with you off air about this particular issue. I've been in that town immediately after the incident happened. The SABC was there. I got to experience, you know, certain elements, got to talk to, you know, both races in that particular town. And there's a sense of, you know, disunity amongst the residents in that particular town. So would you personally say that racism is much more rife in your small towns as, you know, compared to your biggest towns and cities?
Yeah, as I was saying to you, I think they're countervailing forces, and it's important to see both of them. On the one hand, in a small town, small towns are generally less dynamic. There's generally less coming and going, and so that means entrenched social systems can stick harder. Which speaks to the point of Coligny not growing out of a racist past. On the other hand, in small little towns, individual actions are more noticeable. They stand out to a greater extent. In large urban areas, you can have large areas where there's an almost entire predominance of one race and large areas where there's an almost entire predominance of another race, and the meetings between the two don't get seen by people who stick there. So in a town like Coligny, I was encouraged to learn that not so long before this tragedy, there'd been an interracial marriage of a couple who were in their 70s that was welcomed generally by the town. I think that's a healthy sign. Obviously, one healthy sign doesn't cancel out negative signs.
That's been done, yes.
But it's important to see that those kinds of things can happen and to grow from that, I think.
And as I said, sentencing in this case has been postponed to late January next year. But will the fact that the two have been found guilty of murder make a difference in our society? Will it be a lesson to the many who, you know, are still believe in racism?
I hope so. I mean, I think that it's important for, as I said, a society to respond appropriately to bad actions of individuals. Unfortunately, one of the things that the judge did draw attention to was the failure of the police on various counts, the failure of the police to record statements, to record them properly, to record forensic evidence, and that is a big problem. It's particularly a problem in rural areas and farming areas. Agri-SA just did a scientific survey of farmers around the country and found that 75% of them didn't report incidents to the police. This is farmers, farm workers, and tenants. And the major reason that people don't report to the police is that they don't trust the police to really do their job.
This may be just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I mean, I think the criminal justice system has a lot to answer for. I think it has to they are our guardians. We have to trust them. See something, say something. That's something that's said a lot in America. I think it holds here too. If anyone sees a crime, it's very important to report it. And then it's very important for the police to follow through with their procedures to keep us safe.
Yeah. And the question that we're asking our viewers this afternoon is, how do we stop racism from moving from one generation to the next? You know, some people believe that racism is generational. Kids take it from their parents, for example. Let us make an example with the juror in this Coligny case. Pieter Doorewaard is now 27 years of age and Phillip Schutte is 34. So, meaning Pieter was only 3 years when South Africa attained democracy and Phillip was only 10 years. And the question is, where could they have learned this from?
Well, them in particular, I'm afraid I don't know enough details of the case. I also don't know enough details of the case to know that what they did was motivated by racism.
Racism, yeah.
But generally speaking, I think it is important to acknowledge that racism gets passed down. One of the key ways that racism gets passed down is people's desire for esteem, people's desire to be liked. And so an easy way to be liked, if society supports it, is to say, well, I belong to this race, and this race is great, so this race is better, and my achievements attach me to this race, and the achievements of other people in this race sort of somehow reflect onto me. That's something that you see a lot at schools. Schools form cliques, and being in the cool clique makes you cool regardless of what you do. And so I think it's important to check that, to remind the youth, of which I sort of am still a part myself. I was 4 years old when we came to democracy, that you're actually as good as your own accomplishments, that it's up to you to be a good person.
And the parents, what role should they play in this regard?
Yeah, no, so I think good parenting means saying you're not cool because of your race. And it's not cool belonging to one race to try and put people down who belong to another race. It's intolerable, it's unreasonable, and it's extraordinarily dangerous.
All right, but I suppose it may take time because colonialism apartheid took decades. So it's not going to be an easy ride. It's not going to be something that will happen overnight to bridge the gap.
Well, I think that it's important not to be too pessimistic. One thing that the Institute for Race Relations does a lot is survey people. The media, and I'm not criticizing the media here, has an obligation to look at the starkest and most extreme cases. But people who don't have access to having themselves heard on platforms, major platforms, their views also count. And in the last poll that we did last year, the majority of black South Africans thought that race relations had improved. And the vast majority of black and all race South Africans thought that they had improved or at least stayed the same. There are various other indices, including a poll that we just did recently, that indicate that people think that race is not the major problem. The major problem is lack of jobs, lack of economic development, and crime. And South Africa is not alone in this position. We're going through a 58-month negative business cycle. We're in a technical recession. When the screws get twisted on people's lives in ways that really count, they look for shortcuts. They look for, if you can't be good, they look for ways to be cool. And as I've said, I think racism is a way to get likes, it's a way to get esteem, it's a way to sort of ignore the reality of the matter.
But at the end of the day, it is wrong. Thank you so much for coming through, Gabriel. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Gabriel Crouse is an analyst from the Institute for Race Relations, talking to us about racism and bridging the racial gap here in South Africa. So you can also weigh in on the discussion at SA Today_SABC, #SABC News. It is our Twitter handle. Talk to us. Let us hear what you have to say.